Hey, it's Nicole Norwood here for a little tea time. And today I thought we'd talk um, briefly about the executive path. I think there are a lot of people out there who talk about how to become a writer and how to really learn and move up in the business from that perspective. But I think it's a lot more difficult to get insight into what it is to be a creative executive and some of the really important skills or advice you can take along with you as you're starting out. So I would say, to me, the most important thing to keep in mind as you're starting is to listen. You can learn so much just by being in the room and listening to the conversations and seeing how people react. Now, back in the day, I think this was a little bit easier because often when you were working on a show, you were doing it in a more of a team. So often there would be a senior executive and a more junior executive on a show where you really had the opportunity to observe and listen and learn from that executive who had been doing it for a while, who knew um, great tactics and had a good manner in giving notes and feedback to writers. And often today it feels like we're in a very sink or swim environment where, you're assigned a show, you're the only person on that show, and good luck to you. You're either gonna do a great job and it's gonna work out, or you're really gonna struggle and it's gonna be a lot harder to get your footing. So I would say when you do have the opportunity and you are in that room, whether it's your direct boss, maybe just a more senior member of your team, or even your boss's boss, when you have the opportunity to be in those meetings, so important to really take a minute and listen to how they're delivering information, how that information is received, where they're successful, where they're not so successful, and you learn really fast what to do and what not to do. I mean, it's a little bit watching like a slow motion car wreck sometimes where you can deliver a note and you just see the response coming and it's just not going to go well. That note is not going to be received well. It's not going to go over well. And there's a lot to learn from that. There's a lot to learn just from understanding where maybe you didn't phrase something great or you didn't articulate yourself as clearly as you would have liked to have done. Um, and I think on one hand, the best way to learn is by doing. On the other hand, that ability to sort of listen and observe and take in that feedback is infinitely valuable, especially when you're stepping into, maybe it's a show or a company where you don't really know the interpersonal dynamics yet. You don't know how people like to work. You don't know if there's someone who prefers that you are incredibly direct and specific, or if it's someone who maybe needs a softer touch, who needs someone who can be a little more gentle and delicate as they're expressing the notes. And to me, one of the things that's so great and so fascinating about this business is that it's almost like a new job every time, because every writer, every show, every person you deal with is a different personality and they have different ways of articulating their vision. They have different ways of onboarding notes, um, different ways of processing the information. Some people find it super helpful for you to write down thoughts so they can take a minute and process it and read it and really understand it. Some people like the dialogue and having the conversation and throwing ideas back and forth. And you're not going to know until you really get into the process. You get to know your writers and people you work with. And that's really important to take the time to do, because everyone is not the same. And if you just go about it in the exact same way every time, irregardless of how people take on that information, you're not going to be as successful as if you really appreciate that person's working style and try to tailor the way you give information to them in a way that they will find the most helpful. Because ultimately that helps you and helps you get on the same page, and also builds more of a trust that you are taking the time to really get to know the person you're working with, know what works for them. Ask your writers, ask your producers, like, is it helpful for you to see notes in writing? Is it helpful for you to see them ahead of time and then have a discussion about them? Um, is it helpful for you to have some specifics, or would you rather just we focus on the big picture? These are all important questions to ask, and uh, and just important things to consider every time you're working on a new show or with a new writer, a new screenplay. You really do want to um, create that trusting relationship, and the first way to do that is by listening and really hearing what people are saying. And sometimes that's really tricky for sure. And I think often you will hear in the executive world, we talk about the note behind the note, because sometimes it's not always easy to articulate what's wrong. Sometimes you just know that there's a place where something is just not working, right? It's just not connecting, or there's something missing. And so, for both writers and executives, I think it's important to take things not as mandates, but as um, an indication of something being a little bit off, whatever that may be. And so, maybe if I were saying to you um, that I had a question about, I don't know, why this character is doing something. Maybe it's really not about that moment. It's not about what the character is doing in that situation. It's because something about it is discordant, right? It feels not what the character is. And I might give you a suggestion that you feel is completely wrong, and that's okay. Like, come back with a better suggestion. Um, I think it's so important to be, as an executive, be really open to um, a back and forth, to a process. It's not just about you dictating notes. And I know sometimes that's hard because as an executive, you have other people who are weighing in, who are giving you their feedback to relay. And obviously, you want to be able to do that and share their other people's point of view as well. But it is important to um, not sort of cut yourself off at the knees, right? By delivering something in a way that you know is not going to be productive, or by belaboring a point that um, is not connecting. So, as a young executive, I think it really is important to listen to the people who've been around and done it, listen to your writers, um, and, as you're starting out, you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to, um, you know, talk to be heard, right? You should give notes when you have something really specific to say, or a really clear point, especially if you're working with another executive, and you're there trying to create that trust, trying to create um in some ways a reputation for yourself, right? That you are someone who gives smart, good, focused, helpful notes. And sometimes when you're starting out, it's just about giving that one note that makes someone go, oh, you know what? That's really interesting. I didn't think about it that way. Or, you know what? That's a good point. I get it. I didn't think about it. If you can do that once, twice in a call where you are really focused and it's something really achievable, I think that's how you can ultimately start down the path to creating that respect and insight. You're not there to just throw a million things at them. You're really there to be very targeted and focused, and you put thought into it. You didn't like blow through the script, read it once, and you're just throwing a bunch of stuff at them. You really thought about um, the script as a whole, uh, and how you can um, give some concise notes to help take it to that next level. And, this is a process, all of this, whether it's a feature, whether it's a television show, it's very rare that you're going to get one round of notes on anything, right? Often there are people weighing in at the studio level, at the buyer level, and everyone sort of wants to put their stamp on the work. And so there will be plenty of opportunities to give feedback. So make it count when you're doing it. And again, really be an open, active listener. Try to be focused and targeted and super constructive in terms of the advice you're giving someone. Another thing I will say, just as a last tip that I found helpful, is when you're talking about someone's script or pitch, um, address it as you would if you were addressing um, like a living, breathing thing. So, for example, if I were reading a script and something a character did bother me, I wouldn't say to the writer, John, why did you write that? I don't understand why you would say blah, blah, blah. Instead, I would look at it through the lens of the character and say, I don't really understand why Sarah does this. It seems contrary to what we've learned about her so far. So I really want to be with Sarah on her journey and understand where she's going. And I felt a little lost. So you're talking about a character. You're not, um, tearing down someone's work, or questioning their choices so much as asking what they're hoping to achieve with their character or their story. And maybe that seems like a little bit of a fine line, but it really does make a difference because the writer's invested in the story. They're very invested in the characters, and they want the audience and you as their partner to be that way as well. So really look at it from the perspective of the world that has been created. And if you have questions about that world or the people in that world, that's great. Ask about them, um, and how the writer wants you to perceive them uh, in their own context. So those are just some thoughts about things you can do as an executive as you're starting out, some little tips and tricks. I hope it's helpful, and we'll see you next time.